Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us for our Savvy Ladies Wednesday Wisdom webinar. My name is Maggie Montemuro, and I am the Marketing Coordinator at Savvy Ladies. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the chat window. Or if you are joining us by phone, you can email your question to info@savvyladies.org. Today's presenter is organizing and styling consultant Smith Banfield. Smith founded Clear Space, a company that helps people visualize how great their current space can be. Smith wants to help you love the home you are in. Thank you for being here with us today, Smith, to help us get organized. And I'll now hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Maggie, so much. And thank you, Lisa, for the invitation to participate in this webinar. As I said, my name is Smith Banfield. My company is called Clear Space. And I'm really excited to share all of my ideas with you about how clutter creates a vicious cycle of stress and overwhelm and keeps your abundance just out of reach. Next slide, please. So, William Morris, what a fantastic quote. I feel like this is such a beautiful way to start thinking about your space. Have nothing in your houses that you do not know to be useful or to believe to be beautiful. And this is really, it goes back to that idea of if there's anything that you're surrounded by that is not beautiful and that you do not use, you really need to question why it's there and understand that it could benefit you by leaving your space. I tell a lot of my clients this quote. It allows them to be really conscious about what they are surrounded by. It's part of some of the homework I do with them. And it's really a good way to kind of look at your world in a very objective light rather than with all of the sentimental and emotional connections. It kind of makes it a little easier. All right, next slide. So, what is the deal with all of your stuff? While I may not be a financial expert, I can say with confidence that clutter affects your finances, most often not in a good way. My approach to clutter control and beautifully styling a living space is very holistic and psychological in nature. By introducing new ideas about your stuff, my clients can often let go of old beliefs that are no longer serving them and allows them to introduce new beliefs that are life-changing. So here's an overview of what I'm going to address today. Let's see, the origins of your stuff, like where it all comes from, how it ended up there, how to keep it at bay. How your clutter affects you, this is really emotional and monetarily. Consumerism, which is huge, 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 huge for me. I am going to watch the clock when I start talking about this because I have a lot to say and I don't want to go over time, but consumerism is a biggie, biggie, biggie in this clutter world. Value is really interesting. It's basically trying to get you to understand the ideas of value differ for everyone and that your perceived value may not be realistic thinking. And then the best part, which is new thinking, I'm going to give you steps today that you can start taking and keeping relevant and fresh in your mind to move forward and really wrestle with this beast called clutter. Next slide, please. So the many origins of your stuff seems easy enough, right? Shopping, paper, inherited items, and gifts. So I'm going to go through each one by one just to stimulate your brain into maybe making some connections that you haven't made before. I was at a speaking event last spring, I believe it was. A few of us were giving a talk, and the question I received was, what area of the home is the worst? What is the worst area you see, or what's the average? Like, where do you find the biggest trouble spot? And my quick answer was the closet, because that's where everyone likes to hide everything. That's where I find the bags of items that they're hiding from their husband, or they forgot about, or have just, shoved stuff in there they didn't want to deal with because company was coming over. So the other speaker had a few questions, and I kept thinking about it, and then I came back to it and said, you know what, I'm changing my answer. The number one instigator of clutter is your shopping habit. And I want you to really, really think about this, because why do we shop? Why are we shopping? We're not shopping like our parents did. We're not shopping certainly like our grandparents did. We have a very different culture today, and we are shopping to feel better, for therapy, for escape, to kill some time. Maybe there's an amazing sample sale. You got a coupon in the mail for 20% off at Bed Bath & Beyond, right? We all have those. So those reasons for shopping, I would say, are the big trouble spots, because coupons and discounts really only provide value when, let's say, you can't sleep on your mattress anymore and you have a bad back and you need to make an investment in a beautiful mattress. And Sleepy's is having a sale. That is saving, okay? You are replacing something to better your health, and if you got a discount, even better. If you get a Bed Bath & Beyond coupon and you go in there and buy $100 worth of stuff and you save 20%, you've just brought $80 worth of crap into your house that you don't need. So I want you to just think about this. We really are at a disadvantage with the constant barrage of media that is telling us how much better our life would be. So next on here is paper. Paper is really interesting. I have personally struggled with paper, and I will, in my newsletters, be sharing my new tricks that I've come up with for myself. And I go back to, my dad was an IBMer, and my brother's been there now for a lot of years. And, this whole idea of bringing computers into the world, and especially when we started having home computers and everyone in the workplace had a computer, this was really supposed to solve a paper problem. And in my perspective, the computers can do that. We're all having a problem with it. We're having a problem going from the physical paper to being able to just deal with the screen. So this is something that the technology is there, the tools are there. It's just when you're at the point to make that switch, it's change. It's not an easy, quick fix. It's something that you have to gradually work yourself into, and you might have to try a couple of different ways in order to find something that's going to work the way your brain works. The paper is coming at us from so many different directions. You've got junk mail, right? The physical junk mail that comes in your mailbox every single day. That is something that, not that I wish the post office to go out of business. I know they've been talking about that for years, but I would not miss the junk mail. It's like an extra job for all of us to shred and deal with. So that's something you have to invest a lot of time with, or create a system to put that at bay. Receipts, product information, taxes, business records, it's all endless. It's kind of, if you do not have systems in place, you will be overwhelmed. It's something that has to be structured. If you can't create the structure, you should have someone create that structure for you. Paper is really a big monster to tackle. Inherited items. Okay, this can be hand-me-down furniture. Maybe your sister moved into a place and can no longer use the table. It becomes yours. Your kids have moved out. They're on their own, but your attic is filled with all of their belongings. This one, I really ask the parents of these adult children to give them a timeline and say, if it's not removed by X, it's going to Goodwill. So there have to be time parameters in here when you are trying to reclaim your space. Maybe a loved one left you to make decisions about their stuff after they've passed away. This one is very, very, very hard. You definitely need some time to pass. You definitely have to be in the right space to do it. And more often than not, people need a lot of help with this area. There's a lot of emotional attachment to these things, and it's a very delicate area. So I get it. I've been through it, and I know that it really takes the right mindset to handle it. Gifts are lovely and thoughtful, but how many things are you holding on to that really have no meaning to you other than they were given to you by a particular person? If these gifts don't fill your life with joy or are useful to you, realize there is probably someone out there who would appreciate it. And I'm going to get into this later about the energy of objects is, you may be stifling these objects from actually having their own life and bringing joy to somebody else. So just a few little tidbits there. Next slide, please. Consumerism. Oh, my goodness. This is, I know I don't have enough time to cover my thoughts, so I will edit a bit. I'm going to go right into why we buy. We buy, like I said, why we buy. So I jumped ahead before. So why we buy is this, idea of a want versus a need. And it's very easy for us to talk ourselves into a need when it's just simply a want. For example, you have an event you're speaking at next month, and rather than preparing for it, you're going to fret about what to wear, because if you can resolve that issue, it'll all be fine. When what really you're doing is creating more stress by not addressing, visualizing a perfect speaking event and using the dress that's already in your closet, you're now going to spin your wheels, go shopping, whether online or physically. This is a huge, huge time suck. So, and ultimately, as long as you can feel good going into an event, and that's just one example, these items that we think we have to have, I say there's a lot of different ways to address it, but we are buying because it's in front of our faces, and it doesn't stop. So I just keep that in mind. I'm going to stop that part there. There is a study out of UCLA called Life at Home in the 21st Century. This one little bit of information was amazing to me because I was really trying to understand the difference between maybe my grandmother's life or my mother's life. So we're talking about back in the 40s and then maybe in like the 60s and 70s. How much stuff were people buying? I haven't really been able to find a better example than to say that we now take up 3 times the amount of space per capita than we did 60 years ago. That's a very short period of time to triple this amount of stuff, and I feel like that number will just continue to grow. And it's just having that awareness is going to be very beneficial in terms of why, questioning your purchases. Past versus future. So I'm sure I'm not alone when I say my grandmother saved and reused her tinfoil, back when they still called it tinfoil. When I was a kid, I got designer jeans only when my neighbors outgrew them. And if I heard a fabulous song on the radio as a kid and loved it and didn't know the name of it and the radio didn't tell me who sang it or what the name of it was, I would be devastated because I thought I would never hear it again. Now, and going to the future, I can have whatever I want right now. I'll go on Amazon and click a button, go onto iTunes, click a button. Everything is at our fingertips and on our credit cards. So this is really something that, while it has made our lives easier, where we don't have to go to the grocery store, we don't have to run around to 5 stores to get what we need, we can do it online, that's great. But it's also very slippery slope that rather than just what used to be tempting of the candy bars at the checkout aisle for the mom to manage from the kid wanting to have, now you're at the checkout online and it's like, did you mean to add this? Did you mean to add that? So you have to sort of have your defenses up and ready when you're in the way we shop today. So brainwashing. This is a little, I'm getting a little exaggerated in my term brainwashing only because I haven't had a TV in 8 years, and that was basically because I couldn't figure out where to put one in my open space. I thought I would never survive without it, and I haven't missed it for a day. I watch whatever I want on Netflix or iTunes. But TV is not the only thing that's brainwashing you. When I'm in front of the TV now, I have no patience for commercials. You all have DVRs. You can fast forward through the commercials. So I'm not suggesting that's the only brainwashing, but it's on Facebook. It's on every website you go to. It's in every magazine you read. The media is constantly telling you what you need to be happier, what you need to be smarter, what you need to be better. And a lot of us who have emotional things going on or stress in our lives, we buy it. And buy it meaning I accept this as a truth. And rather than actually purchasing, again, question everything. Happiness is a crazy vicious cycle when it comes to consumerism. There's this idea of I'll feel better in the having of it. If I have it, it will change everything. And that is such a fleeting moment of happiness that it generally can, by the next day's light, it might turn into buyer's remorse and your credit card debt, which turns into your need of being happy again. So it's like we forget that what that purchase is going to do to you in that moment. Okay, next slide, please. Value. Value is great. I have these two different ways of looking at it. So emotional versus monetary value. Emotional, we know all this, right? And these are basically based on what my clients say to me when I suggest they should have this thing no longer be in their life. I hear a lot of, it costs a lot, or it's this reminder of someone in their lives, or that's someone who was in their lives who's no longer in their lives. And both of those statements are guilt. That isn't, oh my God, I love it. Oh my God, I need it. Oh my God, I use it all the time. Those are positive attributions to your emotional value. The negative ones, like I might need it someday, that's a lackful thought. That's just believing that you can't have whatever you want. So when we look at what we're holding on to in the emotional sense, does that emotion feel positive or negative? And if it feels negative, it shouldn't be in your house. Monetary value is really interesting. This all comes down to your perceived value versus the real market value. So you buy a pair of $200 designer jeans, you wear them for a while, maybe you can get $30 for those if you bring them to a consignment shop, or you're lucky if you can get them for $30. But you still have in your mind, but I paid $200 for them, and that's a new item. So there are a lot of things people have in their home where they tell me it's a collector's item, it has monetary value, all these things. And I say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So if you're beholding it and loving it, keep it. But if not, you need to get a reality check. And one great way to get that reality check is to hop onto eBay, look for the item you own, and see what people are paying for it. It might be worth it for you to go down that road, or it might just paint a picture of, oh, this really doesn't have any value. Stepping into time versus money. This is about valuating your time versus the time spent selling items or donating items or whatever you're going to do. The time it is going to take you to make money, and that's the money part. How much money are you going to make with the effort you're going to put in? When clearing the clutter, a lot of my clients say they want to make money on the items they're getting rid of. It's like the deal they're trying to make with me. And then I ask, so how much is your time worth to make that listing on eBay, monitor the listing on eBay, pack it up and ship it, take your stuff to a consignment shop, find an antiques dealer who's interested, have a garage sale. So all of these items that I've just mentioned, they are quite a large time suck. And if you are a busy person, I can guarantee it's probably not something you're going to make time to. And more often than not, those boxes that my clients promise me they're going to sell somewhere end up being at the bottom of the new pile of stuff in the basement or in the attic or in the corner of the room when they promised. And 6 months will go by and 2 years will go by. And clutter is just like a magnet. It attracts more and brings more in. So when clearing your clutter, the idea is, what is the fastest way to get this stuff out of my house? And realize if you save time, you are saving money. If you think it's worth it to make $5 an hour for the item you're selling, you know, you're not valuing your time enough. So I want you to think about that. Next slide, please. How your abundance is affected by clutter. So these 4 areas, this is where I'm going to get into the energy of objects at the end. So your abundance is affected by overwhelm, lacking your space, and stagnation of your energy, and then actually the energy of the objects and how that affects your clutter and your abundance. So the number one reason I get hired is my clients get to a point that they are tired of the ongoing overwhelm and frustration and have finally committed to make change a real priority in their lives. Here's another vicious cycle. It's trying to, give the example, and I hear this so many times. People are like, I was late today because I couldn't find my keys, couldn't find the kid's shoe, couldn't find the black skirt I needed. These are, and the list goes on and on. We've all been there. So how does this affect you, this sense of overwhelm? So you waste the time looking for things. You get distracted in that process. You end up missing your train or get stuck in traffic. You end up late for the appointment. You're out of control, and then you start all over the next day. And this is, you're creating energy and momentum that's actually going in a negative direction. The positive direction is by reining yourself into creating stations of what you need to get out of the door the night before. And if you can't do that, we're talking about setting up a whole new system for the entire family so that everyone's responsible for their things and they always go where they belong. And it's life-changing when the issue of running around like a lunatic has worn you down. Lack of space is, this idea of New York City is at a premium of space. I don't know how many of you are outside of the city, but it's a big deal for lack of space being the issue. And really what it is you have too much stuff. There's no lack of space. You are not effectively using your space. And in that, all the clutter just gets attracted. And by this lack of space created from not having proper systems set up, you are just attracting more clutter. The clutter attracts more clutter. And so when you have no space, you haven't created room for your abundance to come in. This may seem woo-woo to some of you, but it's something I truly believe in, that if you want something to come into your life, you have to have space for it. You create that space and it will show up. Big, big, big one. Stagnation, I want you to think of a clogged drain. There's no life in it. There's no movement. Your abundance needs fluidity and motion. So that's this idea. Stuff comes in, stuff goes out. And we'll talk about that later. So the energy of objects, this is another thing when I'm helping somebody clean out a cabinet or a closet or their garage or storage unit, and they pick up some unidentifiable object. It's unidentifiable to me. They know exactly what it is because they go, oh, and I'm like, ew, what is that? And then they'll explain how important this disgusting, dirty thing is that's been shoved in the back of some closet. And I straight out will tell them, you are not respecting this item. This is completely disrespectful. If you're telling me it has value, you need to express it. You need to give it life. And this is something that if you have a lot of things in your home that are not getting to live and have their life, you're doing these objects a disservice that could benefit others. Next slide, please. Okay, fun part, new thinking. I know that's all, there was a lot of stuff I just gave to you, so I'm going to just get into the new thinking ideas. And this is really something that I think you can start implementing today just by turning your thoughts around a little bit. So experience versus objects. This I have two different meanings for. So rather than placing the value of your purchase on the object, I want you to think about the experience of having this object for a period of time in your life. So rather than being like, I've spent $200 for this item, it's you paid for an experience rather than the physical item. So everything has a life cycle. If you're going to spend $200 on a pair of sneakers, you love them, you're a runner, you're going to use them, this is where you determine what your budget will allow for these sneakers. Are you going to use them every day of the week? They're going to be worn out in 6 months. Is $200 worth a 6-month experience? It might be if running is really important to you. But if you're planning on wearing these sneakers for 2 years and you run every day, you're going to mess up your body, and you're putting yourself in a position to have other expenses. So that's where there's different ways of looking at the items you're buying. Rather than it's cute, I like it, I want it, really think about what that experience of owning that object is going to be bringing into your life. The other experience versus objects is going back to this idea of gifts. If you are someone who has a family that insists on giving you gifts every year that you really don't have a use for, or you just don't have room for, or they're just sitting in your basement or in a closet you don't have room for, it's time to have a conversation. I've done this with my family. We did it years ago, where we actually just stopped giving gifts because we all buy what we want, you know. We will get together and we'll enjoy each other's company, but it's not necessary to show your love with a tchotchke from a store that may or may not have any relevance to you. The other part of it is, if they insist upon exchanging gifts, talk about experience gifts like wine, food, going out to dinner, maybe taking a trip together. So those experiences will give you amazing memories, more so than the objects that just get tucked away that you don't care about. Give to receive, I'm going to fast forward here because I know I'm a little bit short on time. Same concept of great networking. Whatever you give comes back to you tenfold. So look for ways to share what you have, and then you're going to, again, put yourself in this position of creating space for your abundance to come to you. Donating versus selling. Selling requires your time, and rarely do people add up how long it took them to sell the item for $100 if they're lucky enough to sell it. While donating clothing, furniture, housewares, this is a tax deduction, and it's the easiest way to get monetary value. A tax write-off, most tax write-offs are typically larger, meaning of these kind of items that I mentioned, are typically larger than the actual current value. So you might be able to sell items of clothing for very little, flea market style, like 50 cents a piece. But if you bring a bag to Goodwill, I went onto their website, depending on the item, you can write off each item from anywhere from $2 to $30 per piece. That's a real quantitative amount of money that can affect you when you're filing your taxes, that could benefit you better than all that time trying to sell. And this is that same idea of, I want you to think about what comes in must go out, meaning that you buy a pair of sneakers, you throw out the old sneakers. You buy a new pan for the stove, you get rid of another pan. You have to have this relationship, and it really, really makes a huge difference. It becomes super fun. I love it when I bring something new home that actually allows me to throw out two things because it's multi-purpose, right? So those are a lot of ways. Next slide, please. So, in summary, I just want to express again these experience gifts. If you've got these people who give you these things you don't have room for, try the talk conversation now. You know, we're after the holidays. You don't want to talk to them too close to Christmas. Lots of people start their shopping early. So that's the other thing is people with big shopping habits who like to give a lot of gifts, it's really, they just like to shop, and then they figure out who they're going to give all this stuff to, which is generous in one way, but it's just filling their lives with things that may not matter to anybody. Question every purchase. I want you to think ways like this. You see something live, take a photo of it, think about it for a day. You're on Amazon, put it on your wish list and see if you feel the same way the next day. Slow down your purchases. Really think about what is the emotion behind it. Are you buying it to escape, or are you buying it because it's going to bring an amazing experience into your life? Create new systems. I want you to go paperless wherever possible. Photograph your memorabilia. These are great things. You know, one thing comes in, something goes out. All of these are great systems, creating a way for your junk mail. I tell people put a bin near your mailbox, and anything that doesn't have to be shredded goes straight in there, and anything that needs to be shredded goes right next to the shredder, and you put something in your calendar to get that shredding done. And value your time. I took a class, one of Monica Shaw's money workshops. And she said, and this really stuck with me, if a task is taking you more than an hour of your time, you need to pay someone else to do it, or pay someone who has expertise. You know, it's this whole delegation idea. And sometimes people like to beat themselves up and say, I'm not good at this. Well, we're not all good at everything. We all have our skills. We can all share them with others. And once you get help, you start to become an expert, and it starts to be a lot of fun. Okay, next slide. So this is one of my favorite quotes from Walt Disney. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So words don't teach. Only by diving in and taking a hard look at what you own, why you own it, and how you envision your home to be, will you learn about your old behaviors and habits that were taught to you at a very, very early in your life. Awareness is the fastest way to positive change. Next slide, please. If what I've been talking about today has resonated with you, a great way to get a jump start into creating awareness, you can enroll in my 10-week Clutter Cleanse, which starts a week from Friday on February 6th. I will be emailing one tip per week with quick fixes and advanced projects for your top cluttery areas in your home. The cleanse includes checklists, tools, resources, and motivation to get you on track to create new habits. I'm offering this to all of you listening for almost 30% off. The investment is $97. I've cut it to $69, which for less than $7 a week, you can be decluttered by spring. Do we have some questions?
Thanks so much, Smith. That's really great. Can you talk a little bit more about the Clutter Cleanse? Is it a specific time that you attend each week, or is it sort of you show up and participate as your time allows?
So this is on your own time. I've planned it so these emails will arrive on Friday in your mailbox. And what it has in there, so I did it for Fridays, so a lot of people have weekend time that they'd like to plan for this. And it's good to kind of get your feet wet and understand what the project is, if this is a project that you have time for on that day. And again, the idea is we do this as a group, but on our own. So at that point, I get emails, people send me questions, I'm happy to answer and provide support. So each week it's a different area of your home. And I'm not saying like your living room, it would be like closets or junk mail or kitchen cabinets. So they're specific and more that way.
Okay, great. Thanks. Well, I'm guilty of about everything that you talked about in the presentation. So, and I don't mind sharing with everyone that when we first met, you suggested that I take a picture of something that meant so much to me that I couldn't let go of. And I ran home that night, got my digital camera, took 15 pictures of it, and then threw it out. So the strategy worked. The strategy worked. Earlier, a question came in, so I just want to, and you might have addressed this, but the question is, can you provide a strategy for managing the paper? Just one strategy for the paper.
Yeah, I did talk about it a little bit, and paper is so vast. I mean, what kind of paper are we talking about? So I'll say for the most part, if we're talking about an office situation, a lot of people, I would say 80% of the population are pilers versus filers, and that becomes this big resistance. Like I'm a piler. Most people are. But the systems that were created were not created for us. I don't know why they were created that way, but someone decided that was a good idea. So everyone else feels like a failure because they don't have this mentality of filing a particular way, or that's not how their brain wraps around it. So I would say what I've gotten into these days is Evernote, which is an app, and I've actually loved it so much I ended up buying a premium membership. I couldn't believe it. But this is one of those things where once you learn how to use it, for example, I watched a webinar the other day. I printed out the workbook they gave for the webinar, filled in my answers, and then I photographed every single page, made a notebook in Evernote, and I threw all that stuff away. So it's really that idea of if you need a record of this thing, you may want to find virtual ways of holding on to it. Now, I think the one thing that we all of us organizers talk about is, your taxes are one thing, and that's something is you just need to create a filing system for that and have a place to put it for 7 years if you have your own business, and that's one of those things. But most everything else, back in those days where you had to have the actual receipt, I mean, a lot of things, if you've got your credit card statement, I know not many people pay with cash anymore, there's always a record of that transaction. You don't need to hold on to these receipts. And the other thing is, if you still don't feel comfortable with that, I would photograph all of those receipts, again, create an Evernote notebook, and then it's something that you can quickly access. So one thing I put on here, I have so many cookbooks and I never use them. I go on to Epicurious, probably like everyone else does. And what I've started to do is every time I use a recipe, it goes into my Evernote notebook that's called Recipes. And this is something like last night I've been making Martha Stewart's mac and cheese for 15 years, I think. And I have the original piece of paper that I took out of her magazine, which is so covered in stains. So I finally threw it out. I took a picture of it, and it's now in my Evernote app. But the best part about this is when you're at the grocery store and you're like, oh, what's in that recipe? You've got it right there. You don't have to do the search on Epicurious or anything. Like, you have everything you need on your phone, which is always with you. So that's where I think that's the best answer I can give for paper right now. If it's more specific, whoever asked the question can certainly email me and give me more details.
Great. Thanks so much, Smith. So we're about out of time. I want to thank you for the special pricing for our Savvy Ladies community for the 10-week Clutter Cleanse. I think I'll be signing up.
Goody.
Because I live in a small apartment in New York City, and so I have a lot of clutter to deal with. So
yes.
Thanks again. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone who attended, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.